Hello, 8th graders. This lesson, 1-6b, Outliers and Choosing the Best Measure of Central Tendency, is an extension of Chapter 1-6a, which was on mean, median, mode, and range. First of all, an outlier is a data item that is much higher or lower than the other data items. It can greatly affect the mean. It affects the mean. It usually has very little effect on the median or the mode. If we look at example 1, we have items of 12, 13, 15, 68, 11, and 14. The outlier in this particular instance is 68. Look at example 2. If you want to, hit pause and write down what you think is the outlier. Yes, the outlier is negative 10.6. How does an outlier affect the mean? If the outlier is much less than the other data items, it will lower the mean. If the outlier is much higher than the other data items, it will raise the mean. Now let's go back to our first two examples. If we look at example 1, this 68 was much higher than the rest of the data items, so it will raise the mean. Looking at example 2, how is this negative 10.6 going to affect the mean? Hit pause and write your answer, and then we'll go over it. Negative 10.6 is much less than the other data items, so it is going to lower the mean. The next material that we're going to cover is how can we choose the best measure of central tendency? When do we use the mean? When do we use the median? When's a good time to use the mode? The rule of thumb is that if you are pretty sure there aren't going to be any outliers, that's a good time to use the mean. For example, maybe the age of students in 8th grade. You're not too likely to have somebody who's a whole lot younger, say 6 years old, nor somebody who's a whole lot older, say 42. If there are outliers, or there could be outliers, then you want to use the median. The ages of the people who belong to a church might be a pretty good time to use a median, because you're going to have some outliers. You're going to have some babies who are very, very young, or you might have some very elderly people who are going to change the mean, so you're going to want to use the median. Test scores. Let's say the results of an 8th grade math test. That's probably where you're going to have an outlier. So it's probably a good idea there to use the median in order to get a good feel for what the results of the test are. Well, what if you don't have any numerical data at all? Well, then you better use the mode. For example, let's say we talk about favorite flavor of ice cream. You're not going to have any numerical data there because it's going to be something like chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, fudge ripple. One of my favorites at Culver's, cappuccino almond fudge. No numbers. So your data there is just simply not numerical, so it'd be best to use the mode. Let's look at some examples. Wow, I guess I already gave you this one, didn't I? Because if you have the math test scores on the last test, is there a possibility that you could have someone who's really, really high or somebody who just really comes in with a very low score, yes, that could be an outlier. So we are going to use the median. And our reasoning for there is that there may be outliers. Maybe you've got two. Maybe you've got somebody with a score down in the 30s and somebody else who has a score in the 40s. But the rest of the class all scores like 90 and above. If we were going to analyze some data about eye color, are you going to have numbers here? No, you're just going to have eye color. Blue, brown, hazel, green. Because there's no numerical data, we are going to use the mode. And our rationale is that the data are non-numerical. All right, and what about the hours that we spend in school each day? Hit pause and try again. Sorry about that, I got interrupted. Okay, the hours spent in school each day. Now, most school days in the United States are about the same. So therefore, this is a good time to use the mean, because it's numerical data and not likely to have outliers. You're not going to find a school, for example, that has students coming for, say 14 hours out of the day. Most schools are going to be about the same, somewhere between 6 to 8 hours. Most of them are probably around 7. So the mean is a good measure of central tendency to use. Again, try D, hit pause if you need to, and then I'll explain the rationale behind it. To be honest with you, if there's one that's probably changed, this one has probably changed over the last years. Now with school choice, your students can come from quite a distance. And being here at Randolph Christian School, we have students who come from a greater distance sometimes. So in all honesty, when I would look at this one, I would say median. The reason is that there may be outliers. Now, in the days before school choice, I would have probably said mean, because the way a lot of towns and cities, especially cities, divided up their schools and decided which school you would go to was your distance from the school. But median is probably the better choice nowadays, because there may be some outliers. You may have somebody who actually drives in for a longer distance and somebody else who's in for a shorter distance. And that concludes today's lesson, or this particular lesson, on choosing which measure of central tendency to use.